Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bob Andrus with Bright MLS. Welcome to today's Bright Steps webinar, Tools for Virtual Listing Presentations. While our business has changed due to statewide business practices, it definitely has not stopped. Every week, thousands of listings are coming onto the market, going under contract, and closing. But how do you convince a seller that the market is still moving, even in these challenging times? Today, we'll review a virtual toolkit that is intended to provide a series of options and online training tips to help you supplement your existing listing presentation and pivot to meet the challenges inherent in meeting in a virtual environment. Bright coaches are also available to present this webinar in more detail to your office. Just reach out to your local coach. Today's presentation assumes that you're familiar with MLS searches, displays, and CMAs. Our agenda for today is really broken down into three sections. The first part is setting the stage. How do we convince the seller that the impossible is possible? So we'll look at a few areas. The first part will be, what platform will you use for a virtual listing presentation? And we'll explore a few. And then we'll do what we would all do as we're preparing for a listing presentation. We'll do some research, and we'll do research in Bright MLS and I'll share with you some of the tools you may not be aware of. And then the second part, we will actually deliver our virtual listing presentation. What does that look like, and how we'll walk through that sequence and deliver it virtually. And lastly, we'll also look at how we can follow up virtually with our potential seller client. So let me stop sharing in this screen, and we'll go right into where we need to be here in Bright MLS. And so for now, I just want to share with you before we get started what a virtual listing presentation actually looks like. And we'll talk about some of the potential programs you can use here in a few minutes. But the basic idea is, just like when you're attending a webinar, most likely for work, or you're sharing your screen and seeing someone else in a webinar, or maybe you're using FaceTime or Skype in today's crazy environment we're in. So it's really the same concept. The whole idea is once you know the platform, you go in, you create a link, you share that link with the potential seller client, and they're going to log into that meeting at the prescribed time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in some detail, but basically, you're going to share your screen and share information. You're going to walk through different tabs that you'll have open and literally just present your information virtually. So that's exactly what that's going to look like. So bear with me here as I turn off this camera and we start to do our research here. So the very first thing that we'll want to do is choose a platform. Now, there are a number of platforms I'm going to mention here. There's probably others that you could consider. One of the ones that a lot of us use today is Zoom, so you could see them in Zoom. And Bright doesn't endorse any of these products, but I just wanted to share with you some of the ones that are most common. Many of us have used this product for some of our meetings. There are other ones like GoToMeeting or WebEx, and they all have different variations. Some of them will offer free platforms with limited time, and then others will not have limitations on time. They might have some other limitations. So you'll need to decide which is the best platform for you to deliver this virtual presentation. Earlier I mentioned Skype and FaceTime. While you can use those, what I don't think is a good why I don't think it's a good reason to use those platforms don't allow you to share your screen. So you won't be able to share information for your potential client to see what's on your screen. So that's why it's best to use one of these platforms like Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, and others. And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that as we start to set up our actual virtual presentation. So the very first thing that we'll do in here is do some research. I'm just going to jump right into search and go into Bright's public records. And most of us have looked at this, but my subject property is here in Newcastle County, where I live and work. And I also cover some counties in South Jersey for Bright MLS. But let's say I'm going on a listing appointment, and let's say it's Tuesday evening, and I'm starting to do my research here. So here's the property where I'm going to have my appointment with these folks at 107 Stonecrop Road. When you open this up, you've looked at this. This is the Agent 360 report. And as you walk through it, we'll start out on the first tab. This is really where you're gathering all the history about the property. The Agent 360 will tell you everything that Bright knows present about the property and everything previously from previous MLS records. Literally everything that we know about this property is in this 360 report. So the first part of the record, you want to make sure who the owner is and make sure you're talking to the owner and not, maybe someone else who lives with the owner, that kind of thing. So you really want to make sure who has the right to sign the documents, who's on the deed. As we scroll down, you'll check out the taxes here. The taxes are a little over $4,000 on this property. Square footage of the lot is a little over 17,000 square feet. The house is about 2,900 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. And as we go down the page, you'll see, now this listing is actually pending right now, but we're going to look at, you could come in here and look at this previous MLS record, open it up, look at the photos, see what it looked like when the current owner purchased it. And that way you'll get a feel for what maybe they've done to the property since they've acquired it. As much information as you know about the properties, certainly going to help you during this listing presentation. Taxes, we can see that the annual taxes are currently $4,000, a little over $4,000. Sale and mortgage, we want to check out. Here's the deed in 2005, and then we can see in 2015 that these folks took out a mortgage of $289,950, and so that balance is probably $250, $260, although it was a 20-year term, so it's something like that. But we know the value of this property is probably going to end up at around $450 is what I think. So if it's around $450 and they owe $250, $260, plenty of equity, no problem there. And that's really what you want to check out there. Flood report, this tells me this property is in Zone X, and right here I can see that Zone X is outside of the 100 and 500-year floodplain. The last listing would be the last listing before they purchased it. You can check all that data out. The history really just marries the deed information with all the previous MLS records, and you can go back as far as you'd like there. And the map, of course, there's some really cool features in here. And the one that I really like is this satellite view. And you can change this from a satellite to a map, but I just want to look at the satellite view real quickly. And I can see it looks like there's a park or something over here to the right. I can zoom in really close. I can see that this is a corner property. I see there's houses around it. And so I can check out, if I've never been in this neighborhood, what's across the street. Thank goodness there's not a water tower or a railroad track or something like that, but all things you would want to know about the property. I can see the lot dimensions here, and as I scroll down the screen, there's an actual flood map that shows me the area around the property. So that's the Agent 360, and you'll make your notes about this property, the square footage, bedrooms, baths, etc., as you prepare to put together your CMA and whatever CMA platform you use. The next thing that I would do, and I'd like to share with you as you're doing your research, getting ready for this meeting, is share some statistics with you. In this environment especially, there's going to be sellers who will say to you, I think I should wait till next fall. I don't think this is a great time to sell, or maybe even next spring. So one of the reports that we put together here out on Bright's homepage, if you just scroll down a little bit on the right, everything that we've created for this COVID-19 era is housed under Bright Steps right here. So if you open this up, and there's a lot of information here, but I'm just going to scroll down to a tab that says Bright Steps Market Update. What's happening now? Learn more. And when we open this up, you'll see we're going to scroll down to some reports that are put together weekly. And from the time this event started in mid-March, these are summaries. Here's the most recent report that's available. And when you open it up, you're just going to scroll down to your state where your property is located. So my property is in Delaware, and there's about 5 slides in here, and I think it's really worth taking a look at these because these slides can certainly help make the case, I think, that now is a good time to put your property on the market. Lay of the land here, this first slide just shows active and coming soon listings coming on the market starting in February through early May here. And the blue line is 2019, the orange line is 2020. You could see we were humming along here in 2020. And then listings, there were a little less listings coming on the market, but not by much, at least where I'm at here in Delaware. So you want to check out your state for what this shows for your location. But here I can say we have almost as many properties coming on the market. Sellers have faith, that's why they're coming on the market. So the next question might be, but are they selling? So the next slide will show us properties that are going pending or active under contract. And then you can see with the orange line here as we went into March and April, it definitely started to dip, but it's definitely coming back to life and marching right up almost to the same level as 2019. So this tells me this market is moving along. There's definitely a lot of activity happening here. Temp off market, we know a lot of sellers moved their listing to temp off when this event first occurred in March and in early April. And you can see that's what this big spike here is. But then it starts to normalize here. Those listings went back to active or they just simply left the market. I'm going to go down to listings that closed from February, comparing it to last year. And I know closed is a lagging indicator, but you can see here that we're still closing listings, at least so far, almost at the same clip that we did in 2019. So definitely shows this market is alive. And the last slide in this series is showings for properties in Bright and Delaware in this case. And you can see the showings fell off quite a bit in March and in early April, but then they definitely started to come back to life. So you can share this with a seller if you want, maybe even your existing seller, and show them what's going on in the market. This would be a great tool to use to make the case that now is a good time to come on the market. That's one tool you can use. Another tool out on Bright's homepage, if you scroll down a little bit, many of us use a hot sheet over here on the left. There's another widget here I really like called Market Watch. And to set this up, you'll just click on this little gearbox here, this little cogwheel, and you'll plug in your geography. So for me, I'm going to plug in Newcastle County, Delaware first and just save it. Now, this widget is in 2 places. It's out on Bright's homepage, so you could go back out there and look at it, or it just dumped us onto Bright's dashboard, and this widget is here also, and you can view it here. So we'll just take a look at it here. And so this is all set up now for Newcastle County, and I can view this data for back 7 days, 3 days today, and I want to look at 7 days. So if you look at this in Newcastle County, I could share with my potential seller to make the case that this market is alive. There are 114 new active listings in the past 7 days in this county. 18 as coming soon. Look at active under contract, 94, pending 152. So there's more listings going under contract that are coming on the market by just looking at this. So you could definitely make the case by having this open in your virtual listing presentation, and you can narrow it down. You don't have to have it open to the whole county. You could narrow it down to zip code, MLS areas, school district, and show them what's happening in that smaller area. Now, you might not use all these statistic reports, but I'm going to go into market research and just show you 2 more because I think they have incredible value. So I'm in market research, and the next one that I want to show you is called Create Custom Reports. One of the things I think in this environment, a lot of folks might think, well, wow, there's probably a lot of houses on the market, that sort of thing. So when you come in here, I think it might be helpful to show them how many months of the inventory are on the market, because a lot of us know that there was not much inventory on the market before this event occurred in mid-March, and now there's probably the same or a little less in most areas. So if you come into this report, I'm just going to go to Customize, and the lay of the land here is what statistic do I want? And there's a whole bunch of them in here, but I'm just going to go to months of inventory. And my seller's owned this property for about 10 years. So I want to go back 10 years. You can choose 5 years. You could do a custom date range or from a certain year, that sort of thing. So I'm going to go back 10 years. And over here, I'm going to plug in my geography again, Newcastle County. And this time I'm also going to plug in my zip code because I want to show them what the months of inventory have looked like in this little zip code area for the past 10 years. And I'm going to probably choose just residential since my property is residential. And then I'm going to come over here and say generate. And you'll see I have a graph. Now, this is going all the way back to 2010, but check out the spikes here. The trend is downward as we went from 2010 to 2020. And if you just hover your mouse over each of these, so you'll see these spikes are typically in January where the inventory spiked, and this is February of 2020, and there were 4 months of inventory. But if I put my mouse down here on this graph, you'll see there's only 2 months of inventory in this zip code right now in 2020. If my potential seller says, well, I think it might be safer or better to wait till the fall or next year, I would probably say, well, I beg to differ. I don't know what you'd be waiting for. We have the lowest inventory we've had in a decade in this zip code. And we don't know what the fall is going to look like. There could be a bunch of sellers who are waiting until this is all over that are thinking they're going to put their property on the market in the fall or next spring, and maybe the inventory will spike. So this is a really cool tool that can help tell the story that now's the best time to get the property on the market. Last one I want to share with you in here is called a market performance report. Some of you are familiar with this report. It's really cool because it will narrow you down to a zip code and show you week by week what's happening in a local area. So I'm going to come in, and remember I said I thought my property is going to be priced around $450. So I'm going to come in and say I want to show 400 to 500. My property has at least 4 bedrooms and at least 2 baths, so I'm going to put 4 and 2 plus there. And you can search by area, school district. I'm going to search by zip code. I'm going to keep it consistent. And again, whatever you're using in your reports, you can choose. I would stay consistent if you're going to do MLS area or subdivision or school district. In my case, I'm using zip code. So I'm just going to run this report and show you what this looks like. So I could show my potential seller in 19810 and their little world of 400 to 500 similar homes that have at least 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. There's 21 active competitors. 16 have been on the market for 45 days or less. 3 have been on the market for 45 to 90 days, and only 2 have been on the market for 91 plus days. Here's the most recent time period, and this is showing the new listings, active, under contract, pending, closed. And you can see there's 4 new listings this week. 1 went active under contract, 2 went pending, 1 went closing, and you can see week by week activity. This is a really cool report. There's a lot in it. The next part of it will show you how many showings, scheduled appointments, average showings in this environment. And here's our most recent week right here. You could see the number of showings are now 6.5 showings average per week. That's incredible. That tells me this market's actually getting better and better for the past 4 weeks. So there's a lot in this report that would be really cool to share. Again, you'll choose which one of those 4 reports that you'd like to use. Maybe you'll use all 4 of them, but I just wanted you to have the awareness that they're there and that they can all definitely help tell the story that now's a good time to market their property. The next thing that you'd probably want to do once you've done that is you probably want to go in and bear with me here as I move things around. You'd probably want to come in and present your CMA, whatever you've created as your CMA. So this is a Bright CMA, and I failed to put my picture in it, so I'd take care of that before my presentation. But I could present my CMA now and start going through the comparables, and you'll have all of this prepared beforehand. So this is where I'd probably start that discussion. So once you get through that, then you'll talk about the valuation. And of course, we're still doing our research here, and I'm just showing you how I would set this up. The next thing I would probably do for my research is how am I going to market their property? So one of the things that I would probably do is talk about virtual tours, virtual open houses, and virtual showings, especially in this environment. And if you're not familiar with how to set that up, Bright MLS has a really cool webinar titled Managing Your Business During a Shutdown. Reach out to your local coach. We'd be happy to set this up for your office and review this with you. In that webinar, we talk about virtual tours, virtual showings, and virtual open houses, and can walk you through and get you a little bit comfortable with some of those tools that you can use. If you've done virtual tours, I'd probably show a sample of a virtual tour. So let's say this is a virtual tour I previously did, and there's basic ones. There's all kinds of programs you can use for these. Just Google free virtual tour if you've never done one. You can create one on YouTube. So there's lots of places to create a virtual tour, and I'd probably sample one. There are some really cool tools that create really fancy ones. And again, even though Bright doesn't endorse any of these, I wanted to share one with you that's called Matterport. And I know a number of people use this, and these create 3D presentations. If I start from the beginning here, you'll see this is really cool. It just walks you through this property in a beautiful way. So if you're going to use something like this, I would totally demonstrate something like that. As part of your, once you've talked about virtual open houses, tours, or virtual showings, start to talk about your marketing plan, whatever that is. You all have been in the business, many of you, for many years, and you know how to put a marketing plan together that you already use in your listing presentation. Maybe it includes brokerage information, franchise information. Perhaps it includes things like, if you've been in the business for a while, how you sold properties in the last downturn and how you were able to get properties to closing, or even properties that you've gotten to closing in March and April of 2020 and how you took them in this troubled environment and got those properties through the process and into closing. Some of the other tools that we have that you could share as far as marketing, if you're using our mobile app, HomeSnap, HomeSnap has something called HomeSnap Stories. You can just open up your phone, look at your listing, check out HomeSnap Stories. You can also just go to your web browser and type in HomeSnap Stories. That's what I did here. And you'll see it says show, tell, sell. It's really cool. You can create all kinds of really cool things like virtual tours. If I scroll down here, you'll see picture stories, video stories, and this will walk you through that. And you can use this as part of your marketing plan too. So I would go through, you've talked about your marketing plan, we've covered the statistics. And the next thing I would have prepared for our actual meeting is I would have whatever documents that you intend to share. Now, some of you do two-step listing presentations. Some of you just do it in one step. If you're going to do it in two-step, maybe the day before you would share with the potential seller the seller's disclosure, the listing agreement, and maybe even something like Bright's profile sheet so that you can gather all the information. So you can share a lot of that information before the meeting or at this point in the meeting to gather more data. So I'm going to just stop right here for a second, and I just turned my camera back on, and we're going to go back here, bear with me. And I'm going to go back to where we were in the beginning. And so you've done your research, and we've looked at a lot of the tools in Bright that you can use to create a compelling case to put their property on the market now, rather than wait for the unknown or when a whole bunch of listings will come back onto the market and increase that inventory. The next thing you want to do to prepare for this virtual listing presentation is, of course, decide on one of the platforms that you're going to use and test it out, check it out. Come in, you'll create a link, and then you're going to take that link, and what I would do first is share it with a coworker, a family member, have them log in, make sure you know how it works, make sure you can turn on the camera, make sure the other person can hear you very well, and just check it out. The next thing I would do then is probably contact my seller. And so my appointment is Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. What I would probably do is say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, can we spend 10 or 15 minutes sometime on Monday that's convenient for you to test this out? I want to make sure you're comfortable with logging into this, and so that we can test it out and make sure you're okay with it. At the same time, what I would cover with them is that you're probably going to want them to be in this meeting, whether it's Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting or any other program you're using, that you're probably going to want them to be in it on 2 devices. Because when you start the presentation, the very first thing you're going to do is ask them to show you the house, right? Isn't that what most of us do when we start a listing presentation, is walk around the house and let me learn about the property. So I would, on the day before, make sure the seller can log in, review with them that they're going to want to log in on their phone because you're going to ask them to walk through the property and show you the property. And then you're going to let them know that once they've done that, they're going to close out that session and then go to their laptop or desktop and log into the meeting there and continue the meeting, where you will begin to share your screen. So I would, do your research, and of course also in your research, even before you get to that point, when you're checking out this platform with your coworker or family member, you want to make sure of the background that you have behind you, whether you want a headset, depending on what the sound sounds like, and just make sure that everything's professional looking for this presentation. So we've set the stage. Bear with me here as I turn off this camera. So we've set the stage now for our actual presentation for Tuesday evening. What I would do to get ready for the presentation is, if you could look at the top of my screen, you'll see here that I have all of these tabs open. And literally, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to have all of these tabs open. And so if the meeting's at 7 o'clock, around 6:15, I'd start logging in, or even 6 o'clock if you are not sure and have never done this. And just have all of the screens open so that you don't have to create a report, as I just did, in front of you, because I wanted you in the research section to see how you can create those reports. But you're not going to want to do that live. You're going to have them all open in different tabs. And if you don't know, you can have multiple tabs of Bright MLS open. And I'll show you as we begin to walk through our listing presentation. So it's 7 o'clock. The seller comes into the meeting. They're on their phone. You're going to ask them to show you the property and walk around with their phone and show you the property. And you're all experts at this. You'll ask the appropriate questions. You'll ask them to tell you about the house. What was it that made them fall in love with the property when they purchased it? What improvements have they made? And get them talking about the property. Sellers love to talk about properties. And of course, you're building a rapport and making your notes about some of the improvements and features of the property. Once they've done that, and then they've closed out of the meeting on their phone and are in the meeting on their laptop or desktop, then you're going to begin to share your screen. And if you've never done it, you're going to check it out beforehand. Within the platform, whether it's any of the previous ones we mentioned, you'll see just a little share icon. You'll click on it, and a box pops up, and you'll see your browser in that box. You'll click it, and then you'll be sharing your screen with your browser open. And you'll start to walk through your presentation. And the very first thing you might want to do is open up with the statistics. So we're in our presentation with the seller. I scroll through and share with them all of this information and make my case for why I think this is a good time to come onto the market. Perhaps I share with them the Market Watch report. From there, I might show them this graph about the inventory and that this is another reason, a great visual that indicates it's really a very good time to come on the market with this low inventory. And then perhaps go into the market performance report and show them what's happening week by week around their small area. And then, of course, you're going to go through your CMA, and then you're going to have this discussion and walk through the comps, go through all of that, and then come up with some range of value. Once you've done that, you probably want to start talking about how you're going to market their property. And so here you'll show whatever you use for marketing your property, whether it's your broker, your company information, your franchise, brokerage information. You could also share here things like if you sold properties, you've been in the business for a while and you sold properties in the last downturn, you could share how you sold properties in the last downturn. If you sold properties in March and April of this year, you could talk about that here too. You could also here talk about HomeSnap stories that I showed you earlier, and basically you can just open up this website and share with them and indicate that this is some of the tools that you'll be using to market their property. And of course, you'll also open up the virtual tour and show them a virtual sample of a virtual tour you've done, or a sample of a virtual tour, and talk about that. So you really talk about how to market the property, and then you'll just really wrap it up. And then begin to share the documents so that you can move forward with getting this property on the market. So bear with me here for just a minute. The last thing that I would do here is talk about how I would follow up with them after the property's on the market. And there's a number of things that we didn't cover here, which is why I would suggest you reach out to your local coach, schedule a webinar for this, this presentation, tools for virtual listing presentations. Some of the things that we didn't cover here today are things like the listing performance report. And in the presentation, you can say, part of what I'm going to do, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is keep you abreast of how we're faring, how we're performing week by week or every 2 weeks, whichever you prefer. How many showings are we getting versus the showings around us in the same price range as time goes forward, as we're on the market? And that's called the listing performance report. And you can share that. You can also share with them that you're going to set them up on a personal portal to share all the new competitive listings that come on the market from the time that they come on the market, so you can both be on top of any new competition and any new properties that has sold. Once you've covered that, then the last thing I would suggest that you talk about is you can set them up on a virtual folder, some sort of a virtual ability to share everything or most of what you've created in your virtual listing presentation. And if you've never used these, there's a couple of different ones out there, Microsoft OneDrive. I use Google Drive. I have a Gmail, a Google account, and this is easy and it's free. It gives you a pretty fair amount of storage. And basically all you're going to do is you come in and you create a folder, and the folder, you name it Mr. and Mrs. Seller 123 East Main Street, and then you just download some of the reports that we covered in here, and then you just drag them and put them in that folder. And it's easy. You just share that individual folder with the seller. And I would let the seller know that most of what I've covered here in our listing presentation will be in this folder. And all of our documents, your listing documents are in here. And as we move forward in this process, I'll add all of the documents so that everything for this transaction is in one place for you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. And another one in here is Dropbox. So really, it's a great way to have everything in one place and share everything virtually. As we had started from the beginning, we did our research, we put together a virtual listing presentation, and then we're even following up virtually. So from virtual listing presentation all the way through to the follow-up, all virtual. There were a lot of tools that I shared with you today that you can use in Bright MLS that can make the case to get their property on the market now rather than later. And there's a lot of other tools that we didn't share with you today. So again, I'd love for you to reach out to your local Bright coach and ask them to set up a webinar for you and go through some of this in more detail with you. So please stay tuned now as we hear from Mike Delgaudio, Vice President of Customer Support, with answers to your questions.
So at this point in our presentation, we're going to answer the questions that you all submitted at the time of registration. We have with us Mike Delgaudio, who's the head of accuracy and policy, training, and customer support here at Bright. Thanks for being with us, Mike.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Okay, our first question talks about virtual tours, and we have Tatiana from Maryland and Maritza from Virginia who have two kind of related questions. They ask, how can we prepare a virtual tour, and what's the best tool to use for DIY virtual tours that you can send to interested parties?
Sure. So for virtual tours, a couple of different options. If you're unfamiliar with how to make a virtual tour, if you want to outsource it, have somebody do it for you, there are certainly virtual tour vendors who can handle all of the logistics, filming, editing, designing, whatever it is, and then uploading it and making sure that it appears correctly on Bright. And there's the list of approved vendors on Bright's virtual toolkit, and you can find that at brightmls.com/COVID-19. Now, you also ask about DIY virtual tours. There's ways that you can do that. Probably the easiest DIY way to do a virtual tour is to do it via video. So where you physically just have a camera, you walk through the house, maybe you're speaking into the camera, describing the house as you do it. Maybe you edit it in iMovie or whatever you might have for your Windows PC, where you edit and add a voiceover track and describe the property. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. And if you do something with a video, then you can upload it to Vimeo or you can upload it to YouTube, something like that, and then provide that URL in the virtual tour field in Bright. So you don't upload the video to Bright, you upload the URLs to Bright. And then if you do something with a DIY like that, if you do create a video on Vimeo or on YouTube or wherever you do it, then you'll get that URL, and you can socialize that URL however you want. You can post it on Facebook or social media. You can share it via email to whoever. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. You could go further and create a website around the property. It's a little bit more involved, probably has a steeper learning curve. The easiest, probably most straightforward way, using the tools that you already have available, most likely, is to just use your phone to record a video and then upload that to a video sharing platform. Take that URL and use the URL to send it around.
Our next question comes from Yuritsa in Maryland, who asks, can a virtual tour only be made on social media lives, or is there a tool specific for it?
So I'll take that in two ways, because I think I can hear that question in two different ways. So virtual tours, if you're making a sort of a static virtual tour that many people will come and look at the exact same tour, as I mentioned, you could create a video, upload that, and then share that in Bright, or use one of our virtual tour vendors that we have the list of, who will make it and upload it to Bright, or the URLs to Bright. Because you use the word live in there, I'm wondering if you're also asking about virtual open houses, in which case you don't have to use a social media platform for that. You could use something like Facebook Live or YouTube Live or any of the live options on social media to conduct a virtual open house. But you could also just as easily socialize a URL to a Zoom conference or a GoToWebinar conference or a GoToMeeting conference like the one you used to access this webinar. The reason Zoom has become extremely popular is they do have a free version of their account that allows for 40 minutes at a time, which may or may not be long enough for a virtual open house. If it's not, you can certainly go to a monthly subscription for something like that. The reason people are using the social media lives for their virtual open houses is because there is no charge. So once you get your phone or your computer set up to do the live stream or the live event, there's no cost to that. But they're not the only platforms that you can use.
Our next question is from Ellie in Maryland, who asks about choosing the right camera setting and video length.
The right camera setting. If I'm taking that from the technically, how do I set up the camera? If you don't know how to set up your camera, then your best bet is to just going to be keep it on auto. That way it will automatically adjust the exposure and the white balance and everything. And generally, if you're using a modern smartphone, you're using a modern, even a point and shoot camera that shoots video, generally they're going to take a perfectly fine video. For the video length, so there's a couple of different ways that you could do this. So in one situation, I'm imagining that you're physically walking with the camera in front of you, and you're describing the house, the property, as you're walking through it with the camera, as if you're looking through the eyes of the customer. Right? You walk in the front door, you walk up the stairs, you walk through the bedrooms, the bathrooms, and so forth. That's certainly one way to do it. Just one long take of the whole property. That may end up being too long, so you'd end up spending time walking up and down the stairs and transitioning from room to room. That may lose the attention of your viewer. So you could also do that same sort of walkthrough, but when you get back, either on your phone or on your computer, take that video and just chop out the parts that are redundant, walking up and down the stairs, walking from room to room, and condense it down to just a few minutes. I think most houses can probably be shown in 3 to 5 minutes. I think it's a balance between how long your audience will stay and watch versus how much of the house there is to show. So I think you want to show as much of the house as you can without spending time transitioning from room to room, because that can take 10 or 15 seconds, and those 10 or 15 seconds with every single room, it adds up. So my suggestion might be to shoot the whole house with your video camera and then come back and use a video editor, iMovie or whatever, and chop out the parts that are redundant and then post that video.
Our next questions are all somewhat related, and they have to do with if this webinar will be available for viewing afterwards. We've got Kinder from Virginia, Lauren from PA, Joanna from Maryland, Gary from Maryland, all sort of asking where they can find this content for reference later.
Sure. You'll have access to this webinar. I think tomorrow you'll get a link from GoToWebinar that will allow you to go back and view it. And then these will also be archived for I'm not sure, several months on our YouTube channel. So if you just go to youtube.com/Bright MLS, you'll be able to see this webinar and all of the other webinars in the Bright Step series, plus a lot of other really great training. I encourage everybody to go over and look at our training. But we do make these and all of our webinars available on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Bright MLS.
Great. The next one is from Lolita in Maryland, who asks how to communicate effectively when you're meeting with a client in person.
Not sure exactly what this is asking. Communicate effectively when you're meeting a client in person. I think if I'm taking that from a marketing perspective, a marketing question, then it's being prepared. Being prepared with your material, being prepared with your presentation, your listing presentation, whatever it is, ahead of time. Knowing your material, be ready with your material, know what you want to say, know what you want to convey. That will help you communicate more effectively and will help you be more comfortable with your material. Rather than trying to make up a price for that house on the spot, do some research. Know what the house has to offer, know what the comparables are, and you'll be able to speak more effortlessly about the property and the market and so forth as you go in. As far as if you're talking about with respect to social distancing and so forth and wearing a mask, I found in my outdoor experiences that once you get the hang of wearing the mask, that communication becomes something that you can handle, and you just try and ignore the mask if you can. So I'm not sure exactly which angle you're talking from, but wearing that mask and being respectful of them shows, I take that mask as a sign of showing respect to them, that you don't want to get them sick, and then hopefully they'll understand, and the communication just proceeds, and you're just talking at that point. So I hope that helps. I hope I've interpreted your question correctly.
Our next question comes from Kimberly from Maryland, who asks, what stats are available to show sellers?
Sure. Well, there's lots of stats available in the MLS to show sellers to help understand their market, including those that Bob mentioned during the presentation: custom stats, the listing and market performance reports, and certainly there's the COVID-19 market report that Bright's been publishing, just to sort of give a snapshot of the market that we're currently in, given current events. So there's the reports that Bob showed that are sort of the micro reports, the community, the neighborhood, and so forth. And if we're looking for the general, what's happening in the real estate market since the current events have sort of broken out, in the aftermath and the fallout and so forth, then our COVID-19 page may help give that broader perspective. So brightmls.com/COVID-19, all one word, COVID-19. And there you can see lots of information about the current trends, how the market has been coming back as things reopen, how more activity is being conducted, and so forth. So it'll give you a snapshot. So there's the micro and the macro. Those are both available to you.
Our next question comes from Varnell from the District of Columbia. And a related question comes from Connie from PA. They're both asking about how to do virtual open houses with Zoom or other platforms.
Sure. So if you're using something like Zoom, what you do is, in advance, you schedule a date and time when that Zoom will occur, and the Zoom scheduler will give you some information. It'll give you phone numbers and a URL, so people can either join via their computer, they can join via their phone, they can just join, and they will use the URL to access it, and that can be uploaded into Bright MLS. And then when the time comes, you start up the Zoom conference, and all of the visitors will come and visit. You can turn their microphones on, and you can have a conversation with them. You can use the camera on your laptop and show them around. That is certainly an option. And I understand I went through that kind of fast, but if you want to sort of get the step-by-step, the walkthrough of it, I think we have some good training material actually on our COVID-19 page, the page I just mentioned. That's got a page dedicated to sort of the virtual business toolkit. And there is a site, there's a training there that will show you sort of the how to do a virtual open house. It's kind of a multi-step process. So if what I said sort of went by too quickly, then go ahead and check out our COVID-19 page. Look at the virtual business, the virtual toolkit, and it'll hopefully be able to walk you through it.
Our next question is somewhat related to the previous one. It's from Ressie of Maryland, who asks, Facebook virtual versus Zoom virtual open houses, how can they reach realtors and create a list?
Let's see. So the main difference between them, taking the first part, is the Facebook virtual versus Zoom. Sorry. The main difference between the two virtual platforms is that Facebook is sort of broad. It's available on social media. You have to be able to set up to live stream for that. Zoom has a little bit shallower curve to get started. So you just turn on Zoom and your camera will be activated, and so forth. Zoom also offers you the ability to have passwords for your meeting room. So if you're worried about too many people joining or things like that, or you want to be able to see who joins, you may consider using something like Zoom so that you can see who's coming and going, similar to the way you might have a sign-in sheet with an open house. They have improved the security measures around that Zoom hijacking. I believe that has been all worked out with the latest release of Zoom. So if you're just installing Zoom for the first time, you should be fine there. I certainly use Zoom several times a day. I haven't experienced anything like that. How can we reach realtors and create a list? I'm assuming that's how do we get people to know about the open house? You can certainly advertise it in Bright in the virtual open house fields. I'm not sure. So I'm assuming that that's what you mean is how do I socialize that this is occurring? And one of the easiest ways to do that is through Bright and using the open house fields. You can also certainly take that same URL. You can put it on your social media. You can post it on your own Facebook page. You can socialize that out also to your sphere of influence. If you're talking about how do I create a guest list, if you use Zoom or one of the other webinar platforms, you can have people register to join. You can try and get their contact information through chats and so forth. But you can, you should be able to try and interact with folks as they join and at least get their name and maybe an email address or a phone number. I'm not sure of anything that specifically has a sign-in sheet that acknowledges that they've joined, other than making it such that they have to register to join. And I can't think off the top of my head if Zoom has an option for registration. Sorry, I just don't know that particular feature off the top of my head. Some of the webinar platforms do. I don't know if Zoom does. Sorry.
Jeanette from PA has 2 questions. She asks, what's the best way to view documents together virtually on the same screen? And she also asks, must we purchase the updated version of Zoom?
Sure. So if this is, if you want to, let's say you've got a copy of a contract or a listing flyer or something like that on my screen, you'd like to share it with somebody over something like Zoom. It's really straightforward. You don't need to pay anything extra for Zoom for the screen sharing capability of it. Just at the bottom of the window, there's a button that says share, and you can share your screen. You can also do that if you're joining somebody via Skype, one-on-one. They also have the ability to share screen. A lot of the sort of social distancing options that you do have the ability to share the screen, generally from the computer. I don't know if that always works from the phone if you're using the phone's conferencing client, but most of the ones that I've experienced, they do have the ability to share the screen, especially if you're the host. And that way you both can be looking at your screen. You just choose to either share your whole screen or your browser or the specific application that you're using to show the documents, Adobe Acrobat or whatever. You can choose to share that screen. If you're asking about also getting to assign a signature for those documents, so to execute a contract, then you'd use something like DocuSign or HelloSign or AuthentiSign. You would use one of the electronic signature platforms, and that's a little bit different. But the 3 biggies are DocuSign, HelloSign, and AuthentiSign. And your brokerage, depending on your broker, may have a relationship with one or more of those to help you put those documents in and obtain signatures.
Our next question comes from, and forgive me if I do not pronounce the name correctly, Kasahan from Maryland, who asks, how does one create the best 3D pictures for listings?
I can't say that I'm an expert on 3D pictures myself. I know that there were some cameras that took 3D pictures. I'm not sure what platforms actually support taking 3-dimensional pictures at this precise moment. Sorry, I haven't thought about 3D pictures in a while. I don't know how they get created because I'm not sure what cameras do it. You may be asking about like 3D virtual tours. I know that at least one or more of the virtual tours, Matterport comes to mind, that will create from photographs a 3-dimensional model of the house. I think they call it a dollhouse or something like that, where you can actually create a 3-dimensional model of the house based on photographs. Then you would go through that particular vendor. They've got the special software in order to create those virtual tours. I so apologize. I don't actually know how to create 3D pictures using your own camera, your own phone, unless that feature was already built into the camera or into the phone, in which case you'd press whatever the right sequence of buttons are and go into the right app for that. But other than that, I don't actually know.
Charles from PA asks, how do I properly brand myself?
That's a big question. Try and break that down in parts, and I'm not going to go into the full thing of how to brand yourself professionally. You could be speaking about how do I brand myself in Bright, in which case you go into your account settings. You can make sure that you upload your photo, make sure that your broker branding, your broker logo is uploaded all in Bright in your accounts and settings section, where you can upload the information about yourself so that it appears on reports and so forth. Generally speaking, if you're talking about the larger conversation about how do I make a brand for myself, I'm not sure that that's something that I can comment on, other than you may find a class on marketing yourself, on creating a personal brand. If you're finding pay courses, you may also consider, if you have a library card, a membership to your local library, you may find a class on something like LinkedIn Learning or lynda.com. And sometimes your local library will have access to classes that would otherwise be for pay. You may be able to access classes on personal marketing, personal branding, creating a brand for yourself. It's bigger than what I could certainly talk about here, and I'm not sure I'm your marketing guru to talk about it, but you may be able to find resources out there on how to do it.
Next, we have a question from Watha from New Jersey, who asks how to start a smart chart.
You can find smart charts under the Market Research tab on brightmls.com. So log into Bright and go under the Market Research tab, and you'll find smart charts. There's a whole series of videos that are focused on smart charts on the YouTube channel that we offer. So youtube.com/brightmls if you'd like to learn more and get tutorials and specifics on it. You may be interested to know that our next Bright Steps webinar, scheduled for June 2nd, will be focused on smart charts. So there's some learning that you can do now, and there'll also be a presentation on June 2nd about it.
We have next a few related questions, and we have Lilamod from Maryland, Gary from Virginia, Diane from Virginia, and they're all asking questions related to what equipment do you need for a virtual listing presentation? How do you make it professional looking? Gary's asking specifically about stabilizers. Any specifics?
I don't know that I've got real specifics on what specific stabilizer. It really depends on the weight of the camera that you're using, whether or not you're using a smartphone or a mirrorless or a DSLR. Or you can buy specifically a stabilized camera like the DJI Pocket. Osmo Pocket is a stabilized camera. You could certainly use something like that. Your phone, if it's a modern phone, maybe made in the last 18 months, it probably is stabilized. So if you're holding it carefully and you turn on your either optical or electronic image stabilization on your camera, you may be able to use that. If you don't have stabilization, don't fret. You can still tripods are very inexpensive. You can get a tripod on Amazon, even just a cheap one should be fine. You could you also get a monopod, which is a little bit easier to use. Sometimes using something like a selfie stick, just so you have two hands, you have more to grip on the camera. You can still use a stick or a mechanical stabilizer. There's mechanical stabilizers or non-electronic stabilizers that are available on Amazon.com. I can't vouch for any specific one. I know that the DJI is the brand that comes to mind, and there's a few of the Chinese brands of stabilizers whose names I can't think of at the moment. But generally, read the reviews. There's lots of different reviews. I can't make a specific recommendation on what exact tripod to buy. But generally speaking, you want to make the shot as stable as you can. So whether you get a basic tripod, whether you move up to a more robust tripod with something called a fluid head, which is really for like smooth transitions and smooth scrolling, or you go all the way up to an electronic, multi-axis stabilizer. Those are all options. I think as far as professional looking, think about lighting. If you can Make sure the scene is well lit so it doesn't look grainy, it doesn't look underexposed. Those are all considerations. I encourage you, they're not on our YouTube channel, but certainly if you if you went to YouTube and looked for real estate photography, how do I do lighting setups, there's a wealth of information that's available to you for how to properly light and shoot. And you probably can find one specific to real estate.
We next have a series of questions about what programs are best to use to prepare a listing presentation to get the listing signed. We have Kathleen from Maryland. We have Joseph from New Jersey, again, asking, what's the best software? Is it Zoom? Is it Teams or something else?
Sure. There's, we've sort of discussed the gamut of it here. So if you're looking for a listing presentation, they're all good. So Zoom is free, but the free version is limited to 40 minutes. Teams or Slack are good. Discord is good. They're all going to depend really on the quality of your camera on your laptop. So pay attention to how you look and how you appear on camera for the best look. They all should do screen sharing. So you should be able to, sort of quote unquote, flip the camera around and share your screen so you can go back and forth between seeing your face and then share to the screen and continue with the listing presentation. From there, that can also include a display of any documents and then proceed outside of your platform. If they get to a listing agreement, then you would go through something like an electronic signature through whatever the signing software you might be using, whether it's DocuSign, AuthentiSign, whichever you decide to use. But generally speaking, my experience so far, and I've used a lot of these collaboration tools, whether it's Skype, Zoom, Slack, Discord, GoToWebinar, any of them, generally speaking, they're all going to be of very similar quality. Just find one that works for you at the price that works for you, and you should be good. Just learn the tool, and you should be good to go.
Our final question comes from Terry from PA, who asks, how can you see how many listings were added in a particular area that day, week, etc.?
Sure. Well, that sounds like the very definition of what we would call a hot sheet. So if you're unfamiliar with that term, a hot sheet is essentially a saved search that for a particular area, a given criteria, so a particular neighborhood or a particular zip code, town, only 3 bedrooms, only in certain price ranges, you can set up that search and have the system give you updates daily in what we call a hot sheet, and you'll be able to see what the market is, and you'll see what listings have changed. So if a listing that had shown up previously but now has a price change, price reduction, something like that, it will come back up on your radar. You'll also be able to see ones that go off the market, go under contract, just so you can stay abreast of the market. But that would be the hot sheet. Now, if you don't know how to create a hot sheet, that's a new term for you. If you've never created one before, you can find step-by-step instructions. Once again, I'll promote our YouTube channel. You can find that on YouTube. You can also find instructions on our knowledge base at support.brightmls.com. Just type hot sheets into the search bar, and you'll get a step-by-step walkthrough on how to create a hot sheet.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And thanks to all of you who took the time to submit your questions. We appreciate your participation today and hope you have a good one.